Good evening, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to log in successfully, and for those who've left it up until now to actually realize they need to register to get the join link. So let's just hold on a few moments while we let everyone in and let everyone join. I've been asked quite a few times to do these webinars on a Sunday rather than during the week when many people can't make it. So I did it to, I think, I did at the end of last year, and it was quite a success. And I was asked again if I can't please do it again in January this year, hence why we have it today. I see we've got quite a few people joining in, so let me just let them in. As I said, those who've waited for the last moment to sort of register. Um, so let me let those in quickly. I see there's quite a few people, so I will do a poll as always later on during the webinar, just to get an idea of the demographics of the people who are joining, how long you've been in Asia, your reasons for going there. It helps me to sort of fine tune the webinars that I do and make them more appropriate for the people that are actually watching and that are taking part. It does help quite considerably. I'm hoping that we can get through this one relatively quickly enough that we can try and have some Q&A afterwards. Although when I did it last year in December, there wasn't really enough time left for a Q&A on a Sunday. Um, it is a wonderful day here in South Africa, in Cape Town. It's 30 degrees, and I'm sure there are a few of you where it's warm, depending on what parts of Asia you're from, or you're freezing your butts off complaining about the cold. At least you can feel sure or rest assured that those in the warmer parts of the country and those in South Africa are complaining about the heat. I think it's a South African thing. No matter where we are, we'll find something to complain about. Um, there's a few people still busy registering, I see, so I'm just going to wait until they've finished so they can actually get logged on. And then we will get started. The webinar is being recorded. So once I have the recording, I'll be sure to put that onto YouTube so that if you didn't have time to watch the whole thing, or if there was something you didn't quite understand, you can then try and watch the recording. And it's always welcome at any point to reach out and ask questions or ask for help. I like to think that's what I'm there for. Okay, I think we are nearly there. See, there's one or two more people struggling to get in, and then I will get started. Let me start a video then.
At Holborn Assets, we know that trust is the foundation of any financial partnership. For over 25 years, we have been more than a financial services company. We have been a trusted partner to over 20,000 clients with 26 offices across 18 countries. Our dedication to our clients has earned us a 5-star rating on Trustpilot with over 2,000 glowing reviews. As a fully regulated, multi-award winning company, we are trusted with managing over $2 billion in assets. Our team of fully qualified advisors is committed to providing you with personalized, market-leading financial solutions. Choose Holborn Assets, your trusted partner in wealth management and financial advice. Visit our website or call us today to start your journey towards financial success.
There we go. Let me make sure my laptop's plugged in so we don't die halfway on. Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I am happy to see so many people here today. Please be sure to ask any questions if you have. Pop them into the chat as we go through things. I've been doing this webinar. I'm doing this webinar on a Sunday because I've been asked, please, there's just not enough time during the week to be able to do this. So if you don't mind, can you do it on a weekend? So here we are. Now, I'm just quickly fixing something. There we go. Right. A disclaimer, just so that everyone who's watching knows that Holborn, we are a licensed financial service provider. We're actually licensed in quite a few different jurisdictions across the globe. It is important to note that during this webinar is aimed specifically at South Africans living and saving abroad, and the idea is simplifying investments. Important, this is not financial advice, as every person's circumstances differ. And what is advice for one person may be the wrong advice for another person. So it's important that you reach out to a licensed and qualified financial advisor or wealth manager when looking for advice. The aim of this webinar is to try and break down some of the jargon and some of the things, particular when it comes to investing or saving as an expat living abroad. So this is to help sort of educate people in terms of that. A little bit of information about Holborn before we get started, just so that you know, who I am and who the company is that I work for. Holborn as a company, we've been around for just over a quarter century, having started out in the late 90s. We are currently the second largest independent wealth advisory globally, with several $1 billion in terms of assets under advisement. And we have clients in over 30 different countries spanning across the globe. So we're not a small fry, we're a large, big international company used to advising South Africans and other expats from around the globe. I myself, Matthew Theron, I used to work for one of the very big investment companies here in South Africa before moving across to Holborn. I am internationally qualified, not just South African. I have a national diploma in financial management. I have 2 tertiary qualifications specifically in tax and tax law. I'm an advanced level specialized qualification in financial planning as well as estate planning and South African investments. And I've also passed both my level 3 and level 4 chartered exams in the UK. I've also passed the RE5 or regulatory exams required in South Africa to be able to give advice to people living here inside South Africa. I'm also a member of the South African Institute for Taxation. I have, one of the things I keep telling people is when you do work with an advisor, do your homework. I have lots of very positive reviews. I don't think I have a single negative review online. So please feel free to go to Trustpilot, where you'll find Holborn very highly rated, and you'll also be able to find myself in terms of some of the reviews that I've got from across the globe. I've had great experiences working with Matthew as someone new to investing. I appreciate his patience and explaining everything to me very clearly. I think that's the one thing that I find comes across a lot of the time from most of the people I deal with, the fact that I make sure to explain things and I have a lot of patience. Thank you for the sound advice. Had my review, I do regular reviews of the clients. I had my review call with Matthew, explains current markets, changes to my account and how it affects it. This was from someone who was in his 3rd year of his investment. You'll find just if you go to Trustpilot, search for Holborn Assets, and then within Holborn Assets, you can actually narrow down the search and you can search for Matthew Theron. Matthew Theron, highly recommended. I cannot recommend Matthew Theron enough. As a self-proclaimed lazy investor, I appreciate someone who's always on the ball. Matthew takes care of helping you understand what is happening. And one of the things I think, if I may, I think what makes myself different, or what I like to think at least makes myself different, is I see financial planning and wealth management more as education. I believe that if you know what you have and you understand what you have and what's happening, you're more active and it's easier for you. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. Matthew knew what he introducing to me and was easy to understand him. The company, specifically Matthew, has been great guide and resource in understanding and taking my investments to the next level. Right, I think enough of that. We can probably, because there are hundreds of reviews. Okay, let's get started then with today. So, living abroad, people very often ask me and often tell me, where do I set up my savings and investments? Which you'd think is you know, for most people, you're not used to there being a choice. Well, I live in South Africa, I set up my investments here. I look for the local company and I set, but living abroad, you actually have a choice. So where do you set it up? Do you set something up back home, or do you keep your savings and your money? Do you keep it abroad? Are there other options or better options available to me now that I'm living abroad? My advisor back home gave me, I hear this way too often, my advisor back home gave me an endowment and an RA. I find that's the typical golden thing that most South African financial advisors give clients that are living abroad. And perhaps later on I'll go through why it's probably the worst advice one can possibly give. Although when it comes to savings, any savings is better than no savings. I have a tax-free savings back home and a retirement plan. I don't know what to do, so I just leave it in my bank account. And then the worst thing when I'm speaking to potential clients or people online or abroad, and you try and figure out, okay, well, before I can help you, what do you actually have? And they say, I don't know. I have something. I don't know what it is. My dad's advisor set it up. Which is why I think probably the most important thing when it comes to financial advice is that education side of it. You need to know what you have. Otherwise, you could have something that is probably that could be the worst thing for you. I read an article this morning on the top 5 mistakes people make when it comes to retirement from a financial perspective. And the number one mistake that most people have is having the wrong product. And, having the wrong product means somewhere along the line, someone gave you or sold you or encouraged you or advised you to take that product, which was wrong for you. It didn't suit your goals, didn't suit your needs. It didn't suit the sort of risk profiles or something. So, and the only way you will know that is if you truly understand what it is you have. So you should know what you have. That's extremely important. I cannot stress that enough. So the aim of today then is simplifying savings and investments, making it a little bit easier for you to at least be able to figure out, what do I have and is it right or wrong? We'll look at wealth as a journey and how do we actually get there. We'll look at some of the jargon or lingo that you may come across, the different options that are available. We'll look at how do we narrow down the options, looking at tax and currency, etc. Because there are a lot of things that play a role in terms of what product actually suits you. We'll look at whether or not to get advice or do it yourself. There are many people who are able to do it themselves. We'll look at the many risks that are involved, or some of the risks that are involved at least, and cutting through the many options or opinions, looking specifically at tide versus investment advice. What's that famous expression? Opinions are like beep. Everyone has one. Or cell phones is probably the nicer way of putting it. Opinions are like cell phones. Everyone has one. And then we'll have a look at my own 7 simple steps to building personal wealth. And hopefully that will then get us through to a point where you understand a bit of the basics. And as always, free to reach out to me. I don't bite. I'm not scary. So you're welcome to reach out. So let's start off with wealth as a journey, because I find I often come across 2 types of clients. Those who know where they want to be, they have an idea in terms of what the goal is, their financial goals, what they're working towards. And then often when you look at what their underlying investments and structures are, it doesn't suit that goal. Or you'll find someone where they're saving and they have all sorts of different types of savings, but they don't know where they're going. What the goal is, where they want to actually go, what they want to be able to achieve. So let's start off with that point. Let's look at wealth as a journey. So if you're going to go on a holiday somewhere, if you're going to go on a journey, you need to know where do you want to go. If you're going to start saving and investing money, you need to know at least why. What is it you want to be able to achieve? You need to know certain things as well. If you're going to go on holiday, how long do you have to get there? You're not going to plan a holiday trip to, let's say you're going from Beijing and you're going to go all the way to Xi'an. How are you going to get there? How long is it going to take? What mode of transport are you going to use? Are you going to take a bicycle? Are you going to go by plane? Are you going to take a bus, a train, a boat? I think you're going to have a problem if you're going to go by boat. But it helps to underline the fact that if you have the wrong mode of transport, if you have the wrong product, it can either help you get there on time or you could never get there. How much will it cost? Are you able to afford it or not? What are the costs involved? And what are the options involved? And then again, down to that, what type of transport will actually get you there in time? Because again, if you're going to go by boat, you're not going to get there. Someone can sell you on how pretty the boat is and the food on board and the sort of all the nice things and the types of engines, all the benefits that it has. But you're not buying or you're not investing or saving into that mode of transport. Again, the underlying thing is, where do you want to go? How long do you have to get there? And then figure out which mode of transport. Don't first choose the boat or the type of transport you like and then hope it gets you there. And then are there any distractions or attractions that you actually want to be able to do along the way or want to be able to stop for along the way? So when we look at wealth, it's the same thing. What are you saving for? Why are you investing that money? That's probably the first most important thing, because if you know that, you can try and figure out the other things. When do you want to reach that goal by? I want to say for retirement. Brilliant. At what age? Do you plan to become financially independent, retire early in your 40s, your 50s? Or are you just, I'm going to take out a retirement annuity, and if it gets me there by age 90 or 100, it's fine. I've got a retirement annuity. You're going to be very upset when you reach age 60 or 65 or whenever it is that you want to retire and you realize it doesn't get you there where you want to be. Because again, you didn't know any of the other working parts. How much do you need to be able to save or invest to reach the goal that you want to be able to achieve? What type of investment will actually get you there in time? And then will you need access to those savings or, for other needs, for those attractions or distractions along the way? So let's break them down into those. So route planning. Route planning is something that's used in the logistics industry. And, what is route planning? Very simply, and you can use the same methodology in your savings and your investments within finances. Route planning is the process of determining the most efficient path to reach a destination. It involves analyzing the various factors, such as the traffic, the road conditions, delivery schedules, and being able to create the optimized route. So route planning aims to minimize costs and maximize efficiency by finding the best sequence of stops along that route. And ideally, that's what you want to do with your wealth. You want to be able to analyze the various factors and events that are going to happen within your life, looking at different market conditions, where things such as taxes, product options, currencies, there's a lot, analyzing all those different things and finding the solution that creates the most optimized route for you to get to where you want to be able to be. So let's look at that then in terms of that route planning. You know where you are now, where do you want to end up, and then how do we get there? So what do? We start at the very beginning, that SWOT analysis, your current reality. Know what you want, how long you have to be able to reach that point, how much you need to be able to save or invest, or what you will need at the end to be able to do what you want. What are the different options that will get you there? Look and compare the different costs across the different options. Account for detours because life will happen. And then find that solution to help keep you on track. And I find a lot of clients need that sort of solution, a solution which will help to keep them on track. Because it's very easy to get distracted and get, sidetracked, driving from one end of the US to the other. Oh, there's the world's largest cotton ball. Does anyone really care about the world's largest cotton ball? Probably not, but we're going to stop either way just to look at it. Then plan. Create a plan that matches and suits the information that you've got and what you want to be able to achieve. Make sure it matches those goals. Use the information that you've put together. Make sure it matches your timeline, because there's no point that it meets your goals, but only one day when you reached age 90 or one day once you're dead and probably not alive anymore. No, you want it to probably still happen within your lifetime. Make sure that it matches your budget, that you can actually afford it. Because I have an expression that, that I like to know, it doesn't matter how good an investment is, if it creates financial hardship and ends you going up bankrupt, it's not really probably worthwhile, is it? So make sure that it actually matches your budget. Make sure that it matches your accessibility needs. Account for if you may need money along the way, and what those needs could potentially be. And then make sure that it matches at least the mode of transport, the product that you've got. That the product will get you there in the right thing. Again, if you're going to go from Beijing to Xi'an, you're not going to go by boat. As nice and as flashy as the boat may be, with the all-you-can-eat buffets and the live entertainment and all these nice things that you could do, it's kind of pointless if your plan is to get to Xi'an. Then, once you've started that, look at improving it. Do regular reviews and checks to make sure that you actually are still on track. Make those changes along the way. If you need to increase things, look at your budget so that you are able to increase things. If you need to adjust stuff to become more growth orientated or protection, make those changes to keep you or get you back on track. And if the goalposts have moved, because in life sometimes goalposts move, make sure that the changes align with the vehicle and its new timeline. Don't just, carry on as you are, even though everything else has changed. So improve, fine-tune things as you go. And then when it comes to finally getting to that destination, that vision, make sure that, you start off from the very beginning knowing what that destination is. Create that plan using the info, matching your goals, matching your timeline, matching your budget, matching your accessibility needs, and matching that mode of transport. That will then get you to where you want to be in terms of your vision or your destination. So hopefully, and that's the thing I think where everyone should start. Start with a strategic route plan. Make sure everything aims at getting you to where you want to be. Don't just, I'm saving and I don't know why. Or I'm saving because I know where I want to be, but I have no idea if what I've got is actually aimed at getting me there or even the right solution to get me there. Knowledge, what does it say? Knowledge is power. And I think when it comes to investments and savings, I believe as well, knowledge is power. Knowledge is money. Because if you don't know what you have and what it's geared towards, you could end up with a horrible surprise one day. Okay, so what is some of the lingo? Well, what is some of the terminology that you might come across when you are looking at different options, when people are, talking to you? You get savings and investments. Some people don't even know what the difference is between savings and investments. You get local versus offshore, and then you get offshore. And some people think they're offshore, but they're actually not offshore, they're onshore. And trust me, it actually can become quite a complicated world when you're looking at offshore versus offshore, and local. You'd be surprised how many people I come across, some very wealthy clients as well, where they believe they're offshore, but they're not offshore, they're actually onshore. Anyway, active versus passive, something that everyone or most people have heard of at some point, but may not necessarily understand what it actually means. Investing versus day trading, asset swaps, risk profiles and risk appetites, mutual funds or trackers, index funds, term. Often you'll hear of an AMC or an OCF, which has got to do with understanding and being able to, go over costs. EAC is what they use in the South African industry, or RIY, reduction. So that's effective annual costs versus reduction in yield. What are they, and how do they actually help you understand things? Domicile, something that you may often find on investment statements and you hear in the news and on products is about net return, real return, gross return. What are they? Annualized return, cumulative performance, interest rates, coupons. So if I'm earning a coupon, can I cut it out and go to the local store and get a discount or cash it in for something? So there's a lot of lingo that one hears, and understanding that lingo is important to be able to at least figure out what you have and where you're going. So I'm going to go through some of the most basic and probably some of the important ones that I think you should know. And let's start off with, very simply, what is the difference between saving and investment? Now, I always like to say savings is the foundation and an investment is the actual building. Or savings represents that part of your income which you don't spend. You put that in the bank and you protect it, you save it. What is the purpose for savings? The purpose is that safety net, that protection. Being able to fulfill, if something happens, if you break your leg, that you have some money. A lot of your medical aids back home in South Africa, they will have savings portions. Again, the aim of that savings is not to make you money, but the aim there is that if you run out of your benefits and you need money, you have some savings. And what are the risks involved? Low or negligible. You'll note there, and please do note there, it doesn't say no risk. A lot of people seem to be very confused by the fact that very often I don't truly believe there is any such thing as a no risk investment. Everything comes with risk. I'd like to equate it to, if you're going to take a walk down to the local supermarket, one could say, what's the risk? You could get run over. I remember when I was living in China, I got knocked over by a bicycle. So yeah, I mean, there's a chance you could get knocked over by. I've actually had clients who've been knocked over by a bicycle or by a motorcycle and spent 6 months in hospital. So yes, there is a risk. You can't say that there is no risk, and it's the same with investments. You might not see all the other risks, but again, what happens if the bank you've got your money with itself actually goes bankrupt? So there are always risks. And there are a lot of different risks to go through. But when it comes to savings, generally it is low or very negligible. What is the growth or the returns that you might get on it? Usually it's interest based and it's going to be very little. It's not going to make you rich, but it is highly liquid. If you end up in an accident and you need your money tomorrow, you can go and take that money out tomorrow. Or if you've got a 32-day call account, you can give notice, and often, many times at different banks, you can get access to that money earlier. And that's the aim of savings, protecting what you have for when you need it. If we look at investments, investments are a different idea or a different kettle of fish. Investments refer to the process of actually investing funds in something that will grow it with a view to generate returns, actually making it grow. And what is the purpose? Exactly that, to build wealth, the growth. That is the main reason there. An investment is made to provide returns and to help building up that capital, to help building up those assets. And what are the returns? Well, with higher growth, very often comes higher risks. So there, the risks can be medium to very high, depending on what it is that you're actually investing in. But the returns, the growth you get, though, is comparatively higher. The problem with the investments is that very often they are less liquid, so they're not as easily accessible very often in terms of when you need to suddenly access money, which is why they always say an emergency fund is that cash in the bank. It's something where the markets are up or where the markets are crashing, you can access that money and not have to worry about it. Whereas with investments, let's say there's suddenly a market crash because someone has said something dumb or imposed a tariff. How do now you've got to wait for markets to recover. You're not going to wait a few months for markets to recover before you have your leg fixed if you got run over by a bicycle. Now, we in the earlier one looking at investments and savings spoke about return. So what is the difference between interest versus return? And then what is this real return that everyone always keeps talking about? So interest. Interest is the rate in percentage that a bank will give you or will charge you for monies that are either borrowed or deposited. So when you put your money in the bank, they will give you back interest. When you borrow money from a bank, they will charge you interest. And what is the number, what is the primary thing that affects them? Exchange rates, inflation, and how the economy is doing. Interest rates go up and down, and they're often controlled by governments. They don't move very quickly, very slow in terms of movement. Whereas if we look at a return is the percentage that an investment grows by. And there, what is the primary thing that affects that? Well, that's the value of whatever it is that you're actually investing in. And very often that leads to demand, fear, and greed. And depending on what your underlying assets are, what you're investing underneath it, interest rates will affect them, market conditions will affect them. As I said earlier, fear and greed, investor psychology. People get scared and they start selling and prices start dropping, or people get greedy and prices start skyrocketing. And that will affect how much your investment is actually growing or losing. And there, again, when we look at that, that moves a lot faster. It can go up very quickly or go down very quickly. It doesn't need a government to drop interest rates or increase interest rates, which takes time. It can happen very quickly. When we look at comparing them, return versus real return. So when you hear of return, that's simply how much your money has grown by. And that is before inflation. Inflation is that silent killer of wealth that many will often refer to. Very simplified, what is it worth now? So I had $100, it grew to $108. What is it worth now? It's worth $108. Real return is how much has your money actually grown by after inflation. So if I had that $100, it grew by 8%, my return was 8%. But let's say inflation was 10%. Everything else has gotten up 10% more expensive. How much has your money actually grown by after inflation then? So what can you actually buy now? Yes, it's worth $108, but can you buy the same thing you could have bought last year? No, because last year at $100, that with 10% inflation, it's now worth 100, or now costs $110. But your money is only worth $108 because that's how much it's grown. So after inflation, your money is not worth the same thing. In actual fact, you've lost out 2%, because if it costs 110 and you've only got 108, you're missing 2 rand or 2%, as an example. Local versus, so just very quickly, on that previous note, so make sure whatever investments you have at least outperform inflation. Because otherwise that's when you end up with that uncle or aunt or grandmother or someone who had this retirement savings their whole life for the last 30, 40 years, and suddenly their pension that they're living off, or their retirement fund that they're living off, can barely cover the electricity costs every month. Why? Because their pension or their savings that they were saving for their retirement didn't grow more than inflation. So let's look at local versus offshore. To understand local versus offshore, we need to know what is domicile. And domicile is, where is that investment, or where is that savings actually based? Where does it live? Think of yourself as an example. If you're living in China, what is your domicile? You may be a South African. Your nationality is South African, maybe South African if you were born here. Your citizenship may be South African. If you've got a South African passport, you may have a South African and a UK citizenship, or South African and a different citizenship, Greek or something else. But where do you actually live? Where are you physically located? Your domicile is in China. And when it comes to investments, one needs to understand domicile. Yes, you can have an investment inside South Africa, but where is it physically located? It can own shares in Apple. It can own shares in Dassault Systems in Europe. It can own shares in all sorts of different companies around the globe. But where is your investment actually physically located? If it's South Africa, then the domicile is South Africa, even though it owns things in other parts of the world. Whereas an offshore investment, that offshore is not inside South Africa. That investment is physically located and situated outside of South Africa. So you can get a local investment that invests, so it buys things inside South Africa, and it can buy things across the country or across the world, or a combination. Whereas offshore can do the same thing. You can have an offshore investment that's physically, that investment is in the UK as an example, and it can invest in all parts of the world, but it can also even invest in South African things. But where is that actual investment situated? It's not situated in South Africa, it's situated outside of South Africa. And then becomes the regulatory environment, the jurisdiction, because that's then what becomes very important. What laws and regulations control and either restrict those investments and hinder growth or help promote growth? And in South Africa, if you've got a local, if your investment is situated, doesn't matter whether it's investing and owning things around the world or outside of South Africa, if it's situated, if it's domiciled inside South Africa, it will be subject to South African law. Things such as Section 65 or Regulation 28. It will be subject to the CISCA, the Control Investment Schemes Collection Act. It will be subjected to FAIS, the Financial Advisory Intermediary Services Act. And those things can prohibit and restrict certain types of investments, and it can affect your growth on your investments, and it can affect what you are allowed and not allowed to actually invest in. Whereas if your investment is offshore, then, and it's domiciled outside of South Africa, it's not under South African regulation, then one needs to know what regulations affected there. You also have currency. You can have a local investment that invests in rands, dollars, pounds, euros, Swiss francs, all sorts of other exotic currencies, if you like. Just as offshore, you can have investments that invest in dollars, pounds, euros, Swiss francs. I doubt you'll have any offshore investments that will invest in rands, none that I know of, but I know there are quite a few offshore investments that do like South African government bonds, at least. Active versus passive. What is the difference? Very simply, as the name suggests, active, something is actively happening, or passive, something is passively happening, or, in other words, nothing. So if we look at the difference, an active investment usually costs more. It's more expensive. Whereas a passive investment is usually cheaper. Very simply, let's say we've got two vehicles. And in vehicle number one, we've got no driver. Wherever the car goes, the car's going to go. In vehicle number two, we have a driver. It's going to cost more for vehicle number two because you have a driver driving the car. That said, if a swerve suddenly comes around, you have someone in the car who can help turn around the corner. Whereas in vehicle number one, where you don't have a driver, well, if there's an accident coming up ahead with a swerve, you just have to hit it. There is no one actually going to maneuver out of the way. And essentially, one could look at active versus passive when it comes to investments in the same way. When you have an active investment fund or investment, you have someone who's actively managing, and you're paying them to do that, to actively manage that investment. Some managers are better than others, so you need to be able to do your homework. Someone who can then steer, when you look at that wealth as a journey, if an unforeseen bend comes in the road, someone who can help steer you along that. Passive, you're just going to go along with whatever's happening. There is no one that's going to make any changes or adjust things or try and lead you around that. And hence why, when we look at that investment style, an active fund is one that is actually managed, whereas a passive one is not managed. It just follows whatever the index or benchmark is. So if you have a JSE, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, if you have a passive investment or tracker fund, index fund is something else that they're also known as, that's passively just following the JSE. If suddenly a market crisis comes along, there's no one managing it to try and mitigate how much your funds go down by. It just goes with whatever happens within the market. The advantages, when we look at that, if we're looking at an active style investment, the advantage is that the fund manager can actually make adjustments in bear markets to limit the losses and try and outperform, try and do better than what the JSE, as that example again. How do we, rather than just go down with it as it goes down, how do we try and make it go down less and try and make the ups go a bit better? That's what they're paid to do. Whereas with a passive one, It's cheaper because there is no one that's going to do anything about it. Something that I like to, oh, I see it's on the screen there. I was going to ask, what percentage of passive managers actually outperform their benchmarks? So, in other words, how many passive funds actually manage to do better? So let's say you've got a passive fund following the JSE. How many of those passive funds will actually manage to do better than the JSE or actually do the same as the JSE? And for those, underperform, so do worse than it. The answer is 100%. Every single tracker fund, index fund, or passive fund following, for example, the JSE will do less than the JSE. Why? Because A, they only track what the JSE does. They don't try and do any better. It just follows what they do. But there's also, they have a fee. It may be cheaper, but they do still have a fee, which then results in a lower return or a lower growth than that actual benchmark. So you have active funds, passive funds, offshore, local, savings, investments. But what is your risk profile? Something else you will often hear. I like to always, I ask almost every client, I like to use the Alfa Romeo example. It's that slow and safe versus fast and risky. Are you that slow 1 liter diesel Toyota Bucky? You know you're going to get to your destination. It's not going to get you there quickly, but you will get there. Or are you that 2.9 liter Alfa Romeo with a Ferrari engine? It is fast. It's exciting. It's the fastest four-door car on the road. It's exciting. It's built around you, the driver. You're more than likely to write yourself off. Or it's an Alfa Romeo. You're going to have a problem at some point. What's the guy from Top Gear? His name eludes me now, but Jeremy Clarkson. He said Alpha, and he's an Alfa Romeo fan as well. He's a car guy. And what does he say? Owning an Alfa Romeo is like having a relationship. Now, anyone out there knows that if you're going to have a relationship with a person, there are going to be arguments. There are going to be problems. You can't have a relationship without having problems. And it's the same. If you're going to have a relationship with your car, it's going to have problems. Which is why when it comes to Alfa Romeos, it's not just a car, it's a relationship. It's exciting, it's exhilarating. I don't think anyone who's ever driven an Alfa Romeo ever goes back to driving anything else. It is the petrolhead's car. It's built around you and the feel. But you're going to have problems, unfortunately. I can't think of a single Alfa Romeo I've owned that has not had problems. Anyhow, and it's the same then with risk versus rewards. You get low risk investments where it's slow, it's safe. And you get your higher risk investments. They're faster, but they're more riskier. So if we look at that comparison, slow and safe, it's low risk. Fast and risky, it's going to be high risk. What are the rewards, though? I like to call it that seesaw. If you're going to have low, risk, you're going to have low growth. If you're going to have high risk, you're going to have potentially higher growth, but you could also have losses. And then you need to be able to make sure you're in the right type of investment so that you can withstand the markets and outlast the markets and wait for markets to return so you can then bring those back up. Hence why when we look at your investment risk profiles, if your timeline, if it is a short-term investment, it needs to be that slow and safe. So that emergency funds, cash in the bank. Why? Because if something suddenly happens, COVID comes along, a pandemic, a global financial crisis, a dot-com bust, a Red October, a war, the money in the bank won't have grown very quickly, but it also won't drop value very quickly. It moves slowly. Whereas on the other side, that fast and risky assets, if suddenly something like that comes along and it suddenly drops value, you may need to wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, sometimes for those values to then come back up. And the last thing you want to be doing then is being able to access that money when it's worth less than it was when you went in. It will recover. Markets do always recover, but you may need to wait. So it's not geared, it's not ideal for that short-term savings that you want to be able to reach. So if you break your leg again, my investment's 20% down, you don't want to spend it. You'd rather walk with a broken leg. It's just not practical. So that's where you need that cash, that slow and safe cash in the bank. I can access it. I don't have to worry about markets or anything else. And making sure that your investments are geared towards your risk profile. So for example, if you have that medium to long-term savings, what is the goal? Why are you saving that? And then if you've got it on that slow and safe, you may very well have the wrong vehicle, irrespective of the right type of ideal, you may have the wrong vehicle to get you where you want to be able to do. Anyway, so what are some of the products then? And this is where life becomes very confusing. You get RAs, you get unit trusts or collective investments as they're known, trading accounts, money market accounts, linked investments, stokvels, direct or commercial property, REITs, real estate investment trusts, TFSAs or tax-free savings accounts. I see SARS is renaming those to tax-free investments. The main reason for that is because very quickly, tax-free savings accounts were designed and brought out by SARS as a method for people to save towards retirement, medium to long term. They were not designed and not brought out for the aim of short-term savings, which is unfortunately, because of the naming, what a lot of people use them for. They are not savings accounts. Savings accounts, like your money in the cash in the bank, is for that short term. These are aimed for that medium to long term. There is no or extremely little benefit, if at all any, from a tax point of view, in a short term investment in a tax-free savings account. It's designed for that 15 years and longer. It's not designed for less than that. But because of the name tax-free savings, everyone thinks it's a savings account. It's not a savings account. They're designed to actually be that medium to longer term investments. Call accounts, endowments, government bonds. There are a lot of different products that one can look at out there. So let's try and navigate that, because this is probably where, again, as I said earlier, what is the the article I was reading earlier this morning, what is the number one problem when it comes to retirement savings it's the fact that most people are in the wrong product. It sounds almost ridiculous to think, but yeah, you got the wrong thing. So let's look at that. There are 20 different banks, as when I did this particular webinar the first time, 20 different banks in South Africa offering more than 123 different products. How do you, as a person who, and even you'll find a lot of financially qualified people struggle with this. So how do you, as an expat living abroad, try and figure out which one? Do I go to Absa Bank or Nedbank or Discovery Bank or Capitec or FNB? Who do I go to? And then once I'm there, which type of product actually, again, that route planning is the right one to get me where I want to be, when I want to be, and also from the fact that I'm not even living inside South Africa, I'm living abroad. So which one will take that into account, if any of them? So how do we figure out? Because there are a lot of options out there, and that was just looking at banks. Now, first thing you need to ask yourself is, who do I go to for help? And there are a lot of options. Do I go to an investment company or an insurance company? Do I go to some form of investment platform to set up my savings and investments? Or do I just go to the bank? Once we've chosen from that four, you now have another choice to make. Do I want to invest in unit trusts or linked investments? Do I want an endowment policy? Is a retirement policy maybe the right thing for me? Or should it be a tax-free savings account? Or maybe the better option is a fixed deposit or regular money market savings accounts? Or should I look at life bonds? So now what product am I actually going to use? More importantly, how am I going to own that product? I'm just going to take it out in my own name? Or am I going to put it within an endowment structure where it's owned by a life insurance company? Do I set up a trust and then open that product with that particular company in that product? Or do I use it within a pension structure? And then more importantly, do I set that up at home or do I set that up abroad? So now our options become even more complex. And then what do I actually own? Let's say I have that endowment ownership structure within an offshore endowment inside South Africa through a life insurance company. What am I going to put into that? Am I going to hold corporate bonds or government bonds? Is it going to be cash? Is it going to be ETFs, those exchange funds, index funds, tracker funds? Or is it going to be actively managed funds, mutual funds, hedge funds? Is it going to be commodities? What am I going to put into it? Different equities. How do we? There's a lot of different things. So navigating those different options, that's where one needs to decide: do you actually need help, or do you know enough to be able to do it yourself? More importantly, do you think your financial advisor or wealth manager is helping you choose that? Does he actually or she actually know enough to be able to do that? So Again, where do I set that up once I've got all of that? And look at that big difference, how it multiplies then. Because do you set it up abroad or do you set it up at home? Because you have all those same options abroad that you have at home. Which one best actually suits you? So let's cut out, for example, some of them. Let's say you're going to go through an insurance company. What do you set up with that insurance company? There are a lot of different options. How are you going to set that up? Are you going to do it through your personal name, endowment, or pension fund? Let's say you're only going to do it locally. So we're taking out all the offshore or the international structures. You can see then how very limited when we come to most South Africans setting things up. If we look at the previous option, what's available, what is it that most people actually end up using? Very little of that. Most won't have listed shares and private shares or government and corporate bonds within their things, or crypto or CFDs or commodities, commercial property alternatives. Most will just go for that regular vanilla. Let's set something up back home through, one of the big international insurance companies or the bank, and stick to the vanilla stuff. So you cut yourself out of a lot of options when you start to do that. Just to try and bring some numbers to that to show you how limiting things are when you limit yourself like that. If we look at South Africa, there are 1,000, at the time that I did this, 1,878 South African-based investment funds, of which we have access to 860 offshore and 221 South African-based hedge funds. If we compare that to the UK, for example, the UK industry, they have access to 4,500 different based investment funds and 8,000 offshore funds. If we look at the US has access to 12,000 US approved mutual funds, so investment funds and ETFs. So I always like to tell people, do I have a, yeah, I do have a screen for this. Investing inside South Africa and within South African jurisdiction, with its limitations in terms of its regulations, it's like going to a buffet and saying, "Oh, wow, look at all of, let's say, a breakfast buffet. There's the croissants and the breads and the yogurts and the cold meats and the hot meats and the mueslis and the yogurts and all the juices and everything," and saying, "Oh, no, thank you. I'm just going to choose from the bread." So why would you do that? Why would you go to a buffet and say, "No, I'm going to pay for that whole buffet, but I only want bread. Don't give me anything else." So how do you narrow down then when it comes to those options, or navigate those different options? Again, that route planning, back to basics. Know why you are saving, why you want to save or invest, why you are building wealth. What is that vision? What is the destination? Where is it that you want to be able to get? And then based on that and where you are now, you choose the most appropriate solution based on not just which boat looks fanciest or which product looks the nicest. No, there are many other things that play a critical role. Tax, most often overlooked by most people. Look at the taxation. How does tax going to affect that? There's something I like to go through when it comes to clients called the three deadly shins, the three things that erode wealth. While you're trying really hard to make your money grow, these three things are trying their best to make your money worth less, and that's tax, inflation, and currency depreciation. Number one at the top of that list is tax. So make a solution based on, or choose a solution based on which one actually gives you the best tax benefits, if possible. Mitigate as much of that tax as that's important. Look at what currency you are investing that money in. And then sometimes just follow your gut. Ask yourself, very often, a little bit of common sense is all that's needed. Just have a little common sense. Ask yourself, how do you feel? What is your gut telling you? And then look at knowledge and experience. So if we look from a tax point, for example, South Africa is known as a high tax jurisdiction. Income is taxed at up to 45%. Equities, so dividends and shares, is taxed at 20%, and capital gains up to 18%. Now, you compare that to somewhere like the Isle of Man, Guernsey, Bahamas, many other jurisdictions where tax is 0%. Now, how can you, as a person in South Africa, make your money grow free of tax? There is only two ways. either through some form of retirement or pension fund, or through a tax-free savings account, or tax-free investment, as the name's being changed to. The problem, though, when we look at retirement funds is when you take that money out eventually, it must be taxed as income. And if we look above, just move your eyes slightly up to the left, you'll see that the most expensive form of tax we have in South Africa is income tax. So it's SARS way, I like to tell people, it's SARS way of, telling you, no, no, please, ma'am, sir, we don't want to tax you now. We'll wait until it's worth a few million, and then we'll tax you. Or someone else always used to say, it's like SARS way of, what's it, giving you a kiss on the cheek now, so then giving you a kick on the arse later. Or through a tax-free savings account where your money can grow free of tax. So the problem, though, with tax-free savings account is you can only save 3,000 Rand a month. That's the maximum, or you will end up paying a tax penalty. And you'll see there isn't a single website out there, private banker, investment company, I can't think of a single thing that'll tell you that it's better to pay tax than not to pay tax when it comes to investments. Let's look at 10x, for example. More money, more time, and more tax saved. In their example, with a traditional tax-free savings account, if you're saving 3,000 Rand a month, after 13 years and 10 months, your investment on the yellow side would be worth 1.7 million. If, however, it grows free of tax, it would be worth 2.2 million. Considerable size more. So tax-free savings obviously is the clearer way to go. Who's going to say no thank you to more money? Discovery, if you don't believe 10x. Discovery says the same thing. Not using a tax-free savings account yet? Why? You need one now. Everyone will tell you the benefits of tax-free savings. If you're an old Sanlam person and you don't like Discovery or 10x, Sanlam will say the exact same thing. Old Mutual, again, tax-free savings, you end up with more money if your money grows free of tax. ABSA will tell you the same. And this is the important thing, though. It's very, very important to know what the limits are within a tax-free savings. Very simply, you're allowed to invest up to 36,000, so 3,000 Rand a month, a year. Anything above that, and you will end up paying a tax penalty at 40% to SARS. Now, unless you really like paying tax at 40%, remember at the moment you're an expat living in China, you're submitting your tax return in South Africa like a good South African, you're claiming your exemption so you don't have to pay tax in South Africa. Your tax rate is effectively zero. But I'd like to pay tax at 40%. Don't. And something that I've noticed from previous webinars, this 36,000, by the way, it is not per tax-free savings. So you can't have 3 different tax-free savings and putting 3,000 Rand to each of them. It's aggregated across all your tax-free savings accounts. So if you have 5 tax-free savings accounts, you cannot be paying more than, or you shouldn't be paying more than 3,000 Rand combined towards all of them. I'm not quite sure why one would have 5, but there are a lot of people out there, I've gathered from previous webinars, where they have many different tax-free savings accounts and did not know that you could be paying a penalty. Even Alan Gray, why a tax-free savings may not be suitable for you. Again, because if you're paying more than 36,000, you're going to end up with that tax penalty. And I can tell you now, saving 3,000 a month is never going to get you to financial independence or early retirement or getting in that property portfolio or second passport or whatever it is that you are saving or investing for. So if we're going to save something, try and do it where, look at the tax. The tax is important. You want to know what are the tax benefits when it comes to the savings. And is it a right for you as a South African living in China, not for a South African living in South Africa where their income isn't exempt, yours is. The next part then, currency. Now, for those who don't know what the ZAR is the South African Rand. Now, if we look at the South African Rand, we call it the Rand slide. Whether you're looking at euros, the South African Rand against the euro, or whether you're looking at dollars, or whether you're looking at pounds, you'll see something relatively familiar across all of them, the fact that it loses value. And here, that average 10-year slide, or the ZAR slide, is on average 5% a year. Now, imagine I gave you an investment that loses 5% every year. Would you invest in this particular investment? Ask yourself that question. And then ask yourself, well, what are you doing now? Are you changing your money into rands and putting it into that? So, and another way of demonstrating this, I like to ask clients that, particularly when it comes to property investment clients, and those like direct property within their portfolios, I like direct property. But I ask all my clients, when they come to looking at buying property, if you could earn rent, or if you were earning rent now, how would you prefer to receive that rent? Would you prefer to be getting your rent in rands or in dollars and pounds? I've never had a single one say, no, rather pay me in rands. But you go and buy a rand-based property. So make sure your investments, look at what you want to be able to achieve, make sure the investments match. So we call that currency depreciation, the value at which a currency depreciates. And the rand is a depreciating currency. It is a currency that loses value over time. It's also called the foxtrot currency. Why? Because it takes one step forward and two steps back. There are times when it does well, and last year is a brilliant example of that. Even the South African economy, it's a brilliant example of that, where it did very well. But if we look at why did it do well, there's a lot more involved to it. There's a lot more macroeconomics involved to that. It's got to do with the economy, our GDP. It's got to do with the geopolitics of the country. It's got to do with sustainability. There's a lot that plays a role in terms of that. Yes, who's in power at the time and who is the president at the time plays a role, but a very smallish role. You'll find things may bump up or suddenly go down with the change of president, but it normally comes back to the norm relatively soon. But here, what we can see from this slide is it's not also for those who believe it's only since 1990. No, it's not something that's only been happening since since 1994. Going back even to the very, very early 80s, you can see that the rand was and has been a depreciating currency. It's lost value for most of its life. And yes, while it's doing well now, and the local investment market is going on about how well the South African rand is doing and how well the South African markets are doing, don't follow that dumb money. Don't be jumping from one thing to the next thing or moving to the next best thing, because inherently you end up losing. So here you can see that since 1980, the rand has lost value. And on average, despite the fact that some years it's good, some years it's bad, some years we lose 17%, on average, though, over that medium to longer term, it's 5% a year that we lose in terms of value, the rand against other hard currencies. Another way of looking at that. So imagine in 1980, you had 1 rand or $1. It was worth the same. By 2000, so 20 years later, $1 would get you 7 rand. By 2012, so imagine you'd kept your money in dollars, not because your money's grown, not because your investments have done well, but just because of what the money's in. If you kept your money in dollars, you'd now be getting 7 rand. By 2012, you'd have 11 rand for every dollar. And now, as at the end of last year, it was closer to 17 rand. It's now 16 rand 50. This was done at the mid last year, this slide. So, but again, if you'd kept your money in dollars, you'd be worth a lot more today, not because your investment's grown, but just because of what currency it's actually in. So which currency do you want to keep your investments in? Something that you know loses value every year, or something which you know actually keeps its value? The other side of it is, if you're going to forget about tax and you're going to forget about the currency, just ask yourself, in terms of your gut, what does your gut tell you? Now, something many people ask me is, okay, how much of my money do I keep abroad and how much do I then invest in South Africa? I can't tell you that. Only you can tell yourself that. And that's based on your gut, what your own personal views are on South Africa and its future. And I like to call it the Zimbabwe-Singapore scenario. Let's say you're in the middle now. Where do you see South Africa going? Do you see South Africa going downwards in the future, or do you see South Africa getting better? Do you see us following that Zimbabwe route, where we still have a weakening currency, where we're still politically unstable? At the moment, we have a government of national unity, which is another way of saying a government made up of lots of other different governments, different parties all trying to rule at the same time. With the ANC slowly losing its voter base and other parties gaining their voter bases. So who can say what's definitely going to happen in future? Where we have land expropriation, and the land expropriation bill was passed and approved, where we have high inflation, high unemployment, crime and violence, an unstable power supply, following that Zimbabwe route? Or do you actually think things are going to get better inside South Africa, where we will end up actually going the Singapore route in the next 10 to 15 years, 20 years, for example? We'll have a very strong currency, politically stable, low inflation. Most people have jobs. There's very low unemployment. The economy is stable. The power supply is good. It's safe. Everyone feels, that there's nothing to be worried about. Do you really see us heading that route? And if you see us heading that route, well, then bring your money back to South Africa and keep it here. But if you don't see things going that Singapore route, if you think it may end up going down that Zimbabwe route, then rather keep your money abroad. What's the worst that can happen? If things do go the other way, you can always bring your money back. But if you bring your money back to South Africa now and it does go that Zimbabwe route, then it's too late to do anything about it in the end. There's no crying over spilt milk, as they say. So those hopefully gives you a bit of a background in terms of know what you want, where you want, why you should have an idea of where you want to go. What are some of the kinds of risks and things that you will hear? What are some of the things that you need to consider when it comes to taxes, when it comes to understanding whether you should keep it abroad or keep it back home? And then knowing with all those options, what, from an advice point of view, should you do it yourself? Can you do it yourself? Or should you get advice? And given that diverse range of products, given the sheer number of choices and options out there, different asset classes and investment types, the different risks involved from market to institutional, currency to geopolitical, liquidity to concentration, do you have the knowledge and experience as well as the time to do it yourself? Very quickly and off topic, in my line of work as an international wealth manager, I see many local financial advisors move across to the international space. And the sheer volume and number of them that just don't make it purely because the learning curve is so extremely steep with the choices that are available with the product range, because it's just so much bigger than what is available within the local industry, and they end up they just don't know what to do and what sort of options to give a client, or which is the best, and then they end up failing, just going back to the local market. As an expat living abroad, the number of options open to you is astounding. So having someone who understands them and can navigate that is very important. And if your local financial advisor of many years in the industry can't do it, then maybe you should look at someone to help you, or at least guide you in terms of that. Now, let's have a look at that in a little more in depth. And this is something I only started looking into last year. And that was what kind of knowledge or experience is required internationally. And this was brought about because I had a PA who, yes, I had a PA who became a financial advisor, and I thought it cannot be possible, not, knowing what I know. But yes, if we look at financial advice, in the EU, you need a degree in finance. Now, not a degree in arts or degree in, if you want to be go into arts, that's perfectly fine. But, if you want to go into finance in Europe, you need to have a degree in finance. In the UK, you need a level 4, so a degree level qualification again in finance. In Australia, you need a degree. Anyone want to guess? In finance. In South Africa, do you need a degree? No, you don't need a degree. Does it have to be in finance? No, it doesn't have to be in finance. In South Africa, very simply, you need a matric or grade 12 or equivalent, so something equivalent to matric. And it doesn't have to be in finance to be able to start giving advice inside South Africa. And here are two, I kid you not, two real world examples. If you have a standard 8 or grade 10 and an 18-month human resources qualification from Intech, you can give financial advice in South Africa. In other words, you know nothing about finance, but you are able to give people advice on their lifelong savings, their financial planning, their future wealth. with a grade 10 or standard 8 and no financial experience. But you might have a little HR experience though. Another example is you can have a matric with an 18-month, so a year and a half diploma in tourism. So online through PSG or Moonstone, and they have included the SAQA levels for them, and that will qualify you again to give financial advice. I recently, actually, last year, I attended a webinar from one of the big financial expat groups in China that had hosted a webinar with an expert, financial expert, giving advice to South Africans living abroad. And so I looked up who is this person giving the financial advice and what does they do. I kid you not, it was someone many years industry experience with a matric and a tourism background. So you've gone from telling people where to go on holiday to what to do with their money, and somehow that qualifies you. Don't make the same mistake. Find someone who is qualified in finance. Like I tell people, you probably, if you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to expect your doctor to at least have a medical degree, not a 18-month course in tourism. But strangely enough, I don't know why, strangely enough, oddly enough, people don't expect the same from the people giving them financial advice. So do you do it yourself or do you get advice? Now, again, given those products, sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Given those products, the diverse range of products, the sheer number of choices, the risks involved, ask yourself, do you need guidance or is it okay to do it yourself? One of the other things we're going to look at then is if you're going to do it yourself, at least know some of the basics. What is day trading versus investing? Are they the same? Are they different? Which one is more profitable, day trading or investing? What are the similarities? What are the differences? So let's go through just that. So if you're going to do it yourself, let's see what are some of the things you do need to do. Investing is buying an asset like an individual stock or an investment fund, mutual fund, exchange traded fund, whatever fund you want to buy, in the hopes of that your money will actually grow over time. And because most people invest for their longer term goals, like buying a house or paying for college or saving for retirement, they tend to hold these assets for a relatively long period of time. So years, if not decades for some of them. Whereas trading is buying and selling financial assets like stocks, for example, ETFs or bonds or commodities, oil, whatever it is, gold, or currencies, in the hopes of making a short-term profit, so a quick profit. And traders will often be buying and selling multiple times within a day or within in a week or a month, so not holding it for that medium to longer term. So there are some similarities, at their most basic level, they're both relatively the same. You're buying something in the hopes of making it grow. Both involve opening an account to buy and sell things. And each offers the chance to pick from a wide range of different types of things based on your goals. Both of them involve risks. So they are very similar. But while long-term investing benefits from compounding growth, from economic growth over time, day trading relies on exploiting that market differences, those inefficiencies, that short-term difference in pricing, to that volatility, that fear and greed to be able to make a quicker profit. Investing may allow you to gradually build wealth and potentially earn dividends without the need to constantly be monitoring every day or every week, be monitoring markets. However, day trading is something where if you have a high risk tolerance and the ability to dedicate substantial time to it, because you need to be monitoring those markets, you need to be every day watching what's happening, being ready to buy and sell so that you don't end up losing money. In terms of opportunity for compounded returns, again, that's money upon money upon money that grows. Compounding is when you earn returns on your investments, and then those returns start earning returns. So, when you put your money in the stock market, you create the potential for that investment to compound for that value. It goes up, as time goes. The power of growth increases. But compounding doesn't always work in your favor, especially when you have short timelines or shorter timelines, when stock prices go down and you don't have time for it to be able to recover. Then your losses can also actually compound. And while those pluses and minuses of compounding impact both investors and traders, trading comes with that higher risk because of that shorter timeline where you don't always have the ability all the time to be able to wait for the market to recover, to be able to recoup those losses. So investing for the long term gives your money that chance to recover and to grow again following a downturn, which you may not have when it comes to that day trading. So very simply, if we look at some of the summaries in terms of day trading versus investing, timeline isn't the only difference between the two of them. The risk of losses, the shorter your timeline, the more concentrated you are in a handful of things, because day traders won't invest in a whole wide, geographically diversified basket of goods across different currencies, different markets, different asset classes. No, they'll often buy into just a few little stocks, and very often within the same asset class. So your risks are amplified. Buying individual stocks, like most traders do, raises that risk because you could lose the money you invest. Whereas diversified funds, in the mean, again, you spread your money across hundreds of different companies. You're not just involved in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different companies and all your eggs into one basket, essentially. To turn that quick profits, traders will purchase more complicated assets of it. It's like, you get that, oh, this is done well, and you start to take more and more risk, such as options or future contracts, CFDs, swaps, and using margins, and then things start to become really exciting. And although these techniques, hypothetically, may provide you with that potential for higher profits, that quick gain, which is why it becomes so, exciting, they also carry the greater risks that result in your greater loss. So it's hence why it takes much more time. You need to be on the ball and always be paying attention to what it is that you're doing. Tax implications, if we look at that, almost any time a profit is earned, the taxman wants his cut. So income from trading versus capital gain from long-term investment funds is very different, because income, remember, is taxed at that higher tax rate. The time and effort, because the amount of time and research it takes, the amount of transactions it takes, successful trading can and often is a full-time job. There are people who get it right, but very often those people, it's a full-time job. Long-term investment means, well, you can buy it or set it and forget it. Have someone manage it, and you don't have to be every single day monitoring it. And then portfolio representation, due to the amount of risks involved, trading typically only represents a small percentage of the total investments. It shouldn't be your entire portfolio. I like it when clients actually have trading portfolios, because then when I do my reviews, it makes my life a lot easier, because 90% of the time I've done a hell of a lot better than they've done. And we'll look at that in a moment, when the next question is, can you actually make money? And those that do better than I do in that short term, by the time I've spoken to the following year, well, they don't have it anymore, but I still, am doing well. So if we look at quantified strategies, and we look at their day trading statistics, day trading has an extremely low success rate. Only 13% of day traders are able to actually maintain consistent profitability, so they make money for more than 6 months. And only 1% actually manage to make money over 5 years. So unless you're part of that 1%, again, you need to decide, is it something you want to be doing with all your money, or maybe just a small percentage? If we look at financial losses, dominate the industry. 72% of all day traders end their financial years with losses. And if we look at how many people persist despite those losses, day traders typically face financial losses for 6 months before they end up quitting. So they'll do well in the beginning, often with a bit of help from someone within the platform that knows everything and is teaching them, because they want them to put more and more and more in. And then suddenly they start to do badly, they do worse, but they'll keep on, statistically for at least 6 months before they end up quitting. That high risk of total loss. There's a common saying that suggests that 90% of day traders lose 90% of their funds within 90 days. So just again, 90% of day traders lose 90% of their money within 90 days. And if we look at that, a report by the Financial Industry Regulation Authority in the US in 2020 conveyed that a whopping 72%, again, of day traders ended with a loss, so financial deficit. Another study, in case you don't believe the Americans, the Chog study, monitored nearly 20,000 day traders over a period of 300 days, and 97% of those lost their money. So don't take my word for it. A very brief thing in terms of if you're not going to be doing day trading, but you prefer to put your money into a stokvel, there are over 800,000 stokvels available in South Africa with more than 45 billion rand. And while stokvels generally are safe and historically used to be safe, why? Because very often it's a community savings. And the idea of that was that it was a community group. You know the other people are all saving and putting their money together. Members know each other. There's also no requirement to recruit members because you generally all know each other already. It's not like a pyramid scheme where you have to find other people. The problem, though, is stokvels lately with becoming more digital and online. There are usually nowadays a lot of people who don't know who any of the other people are. They don't even know the people managing the stokvel. It's all a bunch of strangers, and it opens it up then to fraud and to scams. If we look at the United African stokvel, where that one failed, costing members between 2 and 500,000 rands each. So stokvels, if you want to save in that manner, yes, but go for one where you know, again, who the actual other members are. Be very wary when it comes to that. So taking that further, then let's look at some of those risks, because there are a lot of risks out there, from currency risk, and that's to inflation, equity. There are a lot of risks out there. I'm not going to go through all of these because I've been thinking that I need to do a webinar purely just on risk, where we can go through every single risk or all the different types of risks. We wouldn't be able to do every single risk. There's just too many. Again, that if you're going to go out and just to the shop, you could be hit by a bus, you could be hit by a car, you could be hit by a bicycle, you could be hit by all sorts of things. Again, what is it they say? More people die from coconuts falling on their heads than by shark attacks. So even going to the beach and lying on the beach carries some risk. So let's have a look at some of the ones that are most important to know about as an expat. Currency. Very simply, what currency are you saving your money in? The fact that currency can either gain or lose value because of economic conditions. And that's what currency risk is. The value that a currency can either lose or gain, and that has an effect on your investment. How do you try and mitigate as much of that currency risk? You don't put all your eggs into a basket. Don't put everything into rands. Put some into dollars, some into pounds, some into euros. Diversify so that if one currency suddenly loses, not everything is in that one particular currency. Another risk that's very important as an expat is inflation. Inflation erodes it makes the money you have worth less. So it doesn't matter that your money is growing. If your money is not growing by more than inflation, you're going to end up with a point where you can't buy the same thing you can buy now. Even though your money is worth more, the cost of the goods will have gone up even more. So there, if possible, try and invest your money in a lower inflation jurisdiction. Equity risk, otherwise known as stock risk. So don't put all your eggs into one basket. And this is more important when it comes to day trading. Don't diversify. Don't put everything into one company. I own gold and Apple shares and Nvidia shares, and I'm going to try and make all my money on those three things. No, diversify. Oopsie. Interest rate risk, the fact that interest rates do change, and fixed income investments, things such as bonds, money markets, they can and will be affected by interest rates. So bonds, for example, they will lose value due to changes in interest rates when things change, or they can gain value. And it's very important that you know what's happening. So don't put everything into one type of asset. Don't put everything into something that earns interest. Put it into different types of things. If we look at commodity risks, so that refers to, again, if you're in the day trading world, I'm going to put all my money into oil, or into coffee, or into gold. Again, different market conditions. Here, when it comes to that, more the prices of them, the demand, that will affect it very easily or very quickly. So don't put everything into one. Try and diversify. Put things into different things. So that if the demand for one suddenly drops and the prices drop, not everything you have is within that one. From an institutional point of view, in terms of institutional risk, that's the risk that the company with which your investment goes bankrupt, or they are unable to fulfill their obligations. So they're trying, when you're setting up your investments and your savings, at least limit that so that if the company goes bust or the bank goes bust, not all your money is there. And one could ask, what are the chances of that happening? Probably next to none. I think the statistic in South Africa is that over the last 30 years, there have been 18 banks that have gone bust. So try and look for jurisdictions where there is some form of government-backed investor protection. Now, in South Africa, they actually launched theirs, I think it was last year or the year before, called CODI. And I get confused because now obviously we're in a new year, we're in 2026. So I think it was 2024 that CODI was launched. That's the government South African version of investor protection. So, and that protects every bank holder or invest or not investment savings account within a bank. It includes stock files, by the way, for up to 100,000 rand. So let's say you've got 50,000 rand with Standard Bank goes bust. Again, what are the chances? Next to none. But let's say it happened, you'd at least get your 50,000 back. If you had 300,000 rand, you're still only going to get your, sorry, 100,000. The value is 100,000. You'll get 100,000 back then. So the limit is 100,000. If you've got 50,000 in the bank, you get 50,000 back. If you've got 300,000 in the bank, you get 100,000 back. Capital risk, that's the risk that you may actually lose all your capital that you've invested. And that can actually happen. So again, as I said in the beginning, some common sense. Make sure what you've got is the right solution for you and meet your goals and your targets. And don't put all your eggs into one basket. Diversify. If possible, and you're able to do that, look for solutions then that have some form of capital guarantees. And then something unfortunate, something such as systemic risk, which often can't be diversified away completely, or is very difficult to predict and almost impossible to avoid, is that systemic risk. A global catastrophic event, something like a COVID or an entire industry collapse, the 2008 global financial crisis, where many of your too big to fail institutions did fail. You can try and diversify away, but it's not always the easiest sort of thing to do. Then you get systematic risk. So not systemic risk, but systematic risk. Systematic risk is known then that you cannot diversify away from that. It affects everything, not just one industry or one stock or one particular asset class. It affects absolutely everything. And those are obviously unavoidable or uncontrollable. So that is unfortunate, but there is always that risk. World War III could break out tomorrow. One could, be overly concerned that with South African geopolitics lately and the war games happening in Cape Town with the BRICS nations and Iran invited, things escalate too quickly, and soon we have the SS Nimitz flowing into Cape Town harbor. There's a lot of different theories out there. But if World War III were to break out, it will have that systemic sort of catastrophic effect across all markets. And again, you're not going to be able to control it, or you won't be able to avoid it if something did happen like that. Now, and then we have idiosyncratic risk. Now, idiosyncratic risk is that uncertainties, that the potential for problems that are unique to that particular type of stock, something that you won't have seen in advance, something where you won't have known about, and is very particular to that particular kind of stock or asset class. How do you mitigate that? Again, something that you say almost every single time: don't put your eggs into one basket, diversify. Liquidity, and this is probably very important from a investment sort of thing, making sure that if you've got that route plan, making a potential or making access for funds along the way, so that if something did happen, you're able to access that cash. When do you need to be able to access that money? So that money isn't restricted or fixed. Don't put everything into that one sort of basket. Longevity, that's again that your money may run out. That route, the last thing you want is you want to be able to get from Beijing to Xi'an, but you've run out by the time you've reached the train station in Beijing. Make sure your money is actually going to last you to the end. Credit risk, the ability for the company to repay the capital or in the interest to an investor. And again, diversify, manage or monitor credit ratings when it comes to different companies. And then geopolitical, regulatory, market. I'm going to go through. If I go through all those now, we'll just never end up. And the reason I'm going to skip some of those is more importantly, so we can get to the so many opinions. Now, opinions, as I said earlier, are like phones. Everyone has them. And the important thing here is to know that an opinion is a personal view. It's judgment, often necessarily, just something that someone is saying, not based on fact, knowledge, or even experience. Very often just on something that they've heard or something that someone else has said. While advice actually, or guidance, involves prudent future action based on knowledge and experience. And then you get expert advice. And expert advice is that guidance or recommendation provided by someone who actually has the knowledge, the skills in that particular field. And that type of advice is often very sought after in terms of health, finances, professional, personal development. And it's based on a thorough study and experience. So when you're looking for advice when it comes to your finances, do you want someone's opinion? Do you want just general advice, or do you want expert advice? Ask yourself that first thing. Now, if we look at it from the medical field, because it seems to be the most easy people to relate to, you get lots of different people in a hospital. Paramedics, general nurses, theatre nurses, your medical assistant, your GP, your anaesthetist, your oncologist, specialist surgeons. And the question is, let's say you needed a heart transplant. You're not going to go to your paramedic and ask him. You're also not going to go to your GP, even though he is a doctor, or your anaesthetist. You're not going to go to your dental assistant. You're going to go to a cardiothoracic surgeon. If you've got the flu, you're not going to go to your cardiothoracic surgeon or your paramedic. You're going to go to your general practitioner. In the finance industry, there are just as many different people, and people seem to forget that. Bookkeepers, accountants, auditors, everyone understands the world of wealth and finance. But it's oddly enough, when it comes to getting advice, where you need specialist advice, people don't go to a specialist. No, they'll go to their mom or their dad, or their friend with an easy equities account, or my work friend, or maybe my cousin or my sister. They'll go to, rather than getting as an international person living abroad as an expat, they won't go to someone with the specialities and the qualifications, a wealth manager specializing in that. They'll go to their regular insurance salesman back home who does life insurance and disability insurance and retirement annuities and short-term car and household insurance and all these other sorts of things. And we're going to ask him or her about expat finances and investment. So again, expert versus opinions. Like I said, opinions are like cell phones. Everyone has them. There's the more, colorful version of that, but as I mentioned earlier. Expert advice is advice given by someone who has studied a subject thoroughly, who is very skilled in that particular job. An expert opinion or person with extensive knowledge or ability based on research, experience, or his occupation in that particular area of study. Hence, a GP for the flu, cardiothoracic surgeon for your heart transplant. A life insurance salesman for if you need life insurance. But if you're looking at expat investments, someone who is actually an expert cross-border wealth manager. As a South African living abroad and earning an income in a lower tax jurisdiction, in a foreign currency, with different options available to you, make sure you're getting advice from someone who is internationally qualified, not only in South Africa and only knows South African products and legislations. Someone who is recognized internationally in terms of qualifications, their taxes, their financial systems, investments. Not someone who has some entry-level qualification with a minimum NQF5. Someone who is international perspective and understanding, not someone who has only ever worked and advised locally inside South Africa from a South African resident perspective. Someone who has the experience, someone who actually does this on a regular basis, first-hand experience of life and the financial challenges as an expert, understands firsthand banking, taxes, the options available, someone who is skilled, has a track record with solid reviews and able to navigate the nuances of doing things from an expat point of view. Someone who is that specialist in their field. This is what they do. They advise South Africans abroad. They do webinars. They offer education and educate others. Not a generalist, not someone who does investments, but also funeral cover and life cover and disability cover and the car insurance and all these other things, as I said earlier. Do you want a generalist or do you want an expert? And then if we look further into that in terms of what is actually the difference between independent versus tied advice. I like to call it that giving you what I have versus giving you what you actually need. And I remember in South Africa when in the early 90s, and into 1992, 93, 94, that sort of thing. Computers in South Africa was one of those sort of things. It was booming everywhere. Everyone was having computers and graphics cards, and you were building your own things and stuff. And you'd often go to computer shops in South Africa, and rather than if I needed this particular thing, they wouldn't say, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't sell that. You would need to go to so and so. They might have it." And then you'd go to that place and they say, "Sorry, we don't have it. Go to so and so. They might." Until eventually you get what it is that you actually need to be able to do the thing you want to be able to do. No, in South Africa, they'd say, "Well, we have this." And they would try and talk into buying that thing. It's not going to do what you want. But unfortunately, they don't sell that. They only sell this. And I find financial services industry is very much similar. That tied advice is, no, we don't do that. But let me talk you into buying this instead. No, it might not be good or suit your particular needs, but it's not the worst. So, let's see if that won't work instead. So another way of looking at it, let's say you want to buy a car because you want to go camping. And you want to be able to go off-road. Let's say you're going into the Kruger National Park or something, or you're going to go into the Gobi Desert or something. You want all that off-gear camping. You want to be able to go through mud and sand and all those sorts of things. Now, let's say you waltz into the local Mazda showroom and you say, "I need a car because I'm going off-road camping." Uh, yes, sir. Well, we have this lovely Mazda 3 Series. Or if we have this, what is it, the CX-60, that utility vehicle. It's an SUV sort of thingy. None of these are going to go off-road camping. But is the guy from Mazda going to tell you, if you're lucky, maybe he will, but is he going to tell you, "No, sir, you need to go to Land Rover, or you need to go to Toyota," and Toyota at least can sell you what is it? What is that big massive thing that they have? Their Prada, or was it? Yeah, they have some real off-road good cars. But Mazda's not going to sell you that. They're going to sell you what they have. And it's the same with the financial services industry. An independent financial advisor is that man, who will say, "This company doesn't have it, that company doesn't have it, but this company can do it." Whereas a tied financial advisor, let's say that Mazda guy, is not going to say, "Go to someone else." He'll try and sell you what he has. So independent financial advisors and tied advisors, they may look the same, but under the skin, they are as different as chalk and cheese. An independent financial advisor has no ties to any financial providers that can influence them on any decision to give you a particular product. They will give you or provide you with the solution that suits the needs of that client without restriction. Whereas a tied advisor, although the job as it implies, will not give you what is necessarily specifically suited for you. They are employed and contracted by a specific company, and they can only give advice on that company's goods. So they will only sell you that company's goods. So does the difference matter? Yes, because very often trading standards will offer different between the two of them. All financial advisors, as I said earlier, should hold, I would say, at least a degree in finance, but we know things are different here. But all advisors should hold some form of professional qualification and work within a regulatory, environment. But an IFA, an independent financial advisor, is more likely to have a broader knowledge, professional knowledge of a wider market, because it deals with more companies and a wider range of companies than a particular tied financial advisor who only deals with that company's goods. So what does it mean for you as the client? Well, unsurprisingly, obviously, you approaching a financial advisor, you expect the best advice. That's what you're paying for, to suit your particular needs. And while a tied advisor should declare and should tell you right off the bat at the very first meeting, "Look, I work for this particular company. I cannot advise on any other products or any other solutions, and therefore what we have may not be suitable." No, they won't do that. However, they're more likely to give you the products that they have rather than the better products that are on the market. Whereas an independent advisor should offer unfettered advice, as they can actually choose from the products and services of different companies from across the globe. So when we come to comparing the two of them, going to a tied advisor very simply, one who works for a bank as an example, you will only be receiving advice on the price offered by that bank. Whereas consulting an independent financial advisor is like visiting a comparison site, and getting a drawdown from a lot of different companies across the whole market, not just that one company. And then finally, we get to my 7 simple steps. And before I start that, I'm going to launch the poll. And for those of you on the poll, if you wouldn't mind taking part in the poll, it helps me to, again, as I said, figure out the demographics of people that are on the webinar, so I can help fine-tune or tailor the webinars to those that actually attend them and watch them. It does help me a considerable amount when it comes to that. So please do, you should see a little link come up in terms of those polls. I would appreciate it if you are. I realize we are heading considerably past our time limit already. But let me go through those 7 steps then as we go. Now, what are my 7 steps to personal wealth? Start or earn money. You can't save or invest what you're not earning. And where you can, upskill yourself. Try and earn as much money as you can. Do what you need to do to earn more so that you can save and you can invest more. Again, you can't save or invest without that income. So try and generate as much income as you can. Look for ways to increase that. Once you're earning a good income, or once you are earning some income, that route planning, that set your goals, develop a plan, know what you want to be able to achieve, where you want to go, do that SWOT analysis, figure out, find out the costs, the different routes, the different options, the different products, know what is involved when it comes to that, and then start saving. Simply making money won't help you get rich, or won't help you build wealth if you end up spending it all. And a lot of people do end up spending it all, and by the time they want to start saving, they're so used to spending it becomes very difficult. Start with just recording what you actually spend, even the smallest amounts. And this is very often where financial coaches or financial wellness coaches can be very beneficial and helpful, because it is good to know what are you spending your money on if you are spending all your money. You'll be surprised to see actually where your money goes. And then you can start to cut unnecessary things, set goals, identify how much you can afford to save, and then create or set up some kind of disciplined savings plan, something that will force you to save that amount every single month, something where my friends are going, I plan to go here for holiday, my friends are going to this other place, it's more than I want to spend, but it'll be so nice, and okay, well, I'll go with my friends. No, that's where the disciplined savings plan helps, because it helps to keep you to your goals and your budget, and helps you to get to where it is that you actually wanted to be. You'd be surprised how many people, particularly living in Asia, in places like China, Korea, and in the Middle East, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, I've met some who've been there even longer, always planned. You ask them, and I like to ask, why did you go there at every meeting? What motivated you? And you'd be surprised how many people went there to save, and 15 years later they're there and they still haven't saved anything. They've not actually gotten around to actually starting. And that's where that disciplined kind of savings plan can actually help you. Then once you've built up some sort of savings, start actually investing. Once you've got your foundation, build the house. Once you've got that nest egg, that protection, now you need to start growing it. So once you've set some money aside, the next step then is investing, so that that money can actually grow. And then once you've managed to do that successfully, you reach the point where you now need to start protecting that money against unexpected events. Minimize the impact of taxes. So reach the point where tax becomes, and this is something that's very easy to do early on in years. I always, when I have a lot of wealthier clients, and particularly when it comes to different types of structures, you need to start at the beginning. Look at your taxes, plan your things efficiently from the beginning. Don't wait until it becomes a problem and then try and scurriedly hurry around to try and fix things. Do it from the ground up. Again, if you're building a house, you've got that foundation laid, and now you've built the house. Don't then try and say, where are the plugs going to go? Because now I need to break open all the walls and put in all the wiring for the plugs. When you lay that foundation, already have the plug points and the wires and things in place that need to go, so you can build that house with everything in place. Don't afterwards try. Then number 7, the last one, manage debt, because debt can be a good thing. You can get good debt. You can use debt to fund various types of purchases and investments. And by debt, I don't mean store cards and credit cards and all sorts of other short-term debts. I mean the type of debt that can help you build wealth, where you can leverage one asset to buy another asset for that capital gain. So those are my 7 simple steps. And again, as you can see, if you've built that journey well, you've set out your goals, you can slowly go from one point to the next point as you actually develop and go through that. So that wraps up our webinar for today. It's taken a lot longer than I expected it to be. You're welcome to reach out to me. I am the group expert on many of your expat groups abroad. You can reach me on WeChat. You can reach me on Kakao Talk. You can reach me on Facebook and Messenger. There are lots of different ways. I am the number 1 go-to person when it comes to financial advice for South Africans living in Asia. So please do reach out. I'm always available. Sorry, I'm very much the fact that I'm doing this on a Sunday rather than during the week does mean I have my 3-year-old banging outside the door because Daddy has taken much longer than he said he was going to take, and she wants to go and swim. I see there's just a few people still busy completing the poll, so I'll just wait for the 1 or 2 of you to finish doing that as we go. Please do feel free to reach out. Again, I am always available. This is what I do. I like helping South Africans abroad at least set their things up correctly. And I'm not going to bite when it comes to that sort of thing. Right. I do thank everyone. I'm going to end the poll now, and then I do look forward to, I will try and set up another one for in February, if that's possible. The February one I'm hoping to do with regards to property investment. I know it's a very, South Africans like property. They like property so much that I guarantee you, 9 out of 10 South Africans, you ask them what's the best performing asset class in South Africa, they'll tell you property. Or what do you think is the best kind of investment in South Africa? They'll tell you property. Oddly enough, and I've got clients like that now where they have property and their properties have done not as well as other things, but they'll still say property is the best. Even though from experience they know in their particular circumstances property wasn't the best for them. South Africans like property. My only problem with property is that most people, you get that emotional property versus that investment property, and people tend to confuse the two. When you go and an investment property is a property that what is the aim? You want to make money out of it, so you need something that's in a good location that gives you a good return, good growth, something where you can manage all the downsides and the risks. But people don't do that. They go and they say, I like this property because, wow, it's so nice. I love it. Have you seen the kitchen? And now you're not buying a property because you want to make money. Now you're simply buying a property because you like the kitchen, or you like the pool, or you like the whatever it is. And what happens then? Oh, I did buy this property. I didn't buy it in that area, which is doing, but I bought it in this area because I like the area. And then you ask them, oh no, my sister's living there now, or my mom's living there, or my cousin's living there. No, I was told I could get this rent, but I'm actually now getting this rent, which is significantly lower, or I'm not getting rent at all because, I've got someone else, a family friend living there, or a family member living there who was paying rent but isn't paying rent now. And then you start to think, I thought this was an investment property. The aim was to make it grow. The aim was to make money out of it, but you're making nothing. You're still paying the insurances on it. You're still paying the rates and taxes on it. You're still having to do all the maintenance on it, but you're not earning money on it. That doesn't sound like a good investment. So when it comes to property, I'll do a webinar on that soon. I'll try and do that also on a weekend, and I'll give enough notice on that. But yeah, investment property should be investment. And my own personal opinion, again, I mentioned that earlier, if you're going to get rent, How would you prefer? Would you prefer to be getting that rent in pounds or in rands? Again, at least if you're getting that rent in pounds, it's less likely you're going to put your mom or your uncle or your aunt or your brother or your sister or someone in it. It's actually going to be an investment, probably making you money. Right. Okay. I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you everyone for taking part. I will please reach out if you have any questions and we will take it. I look forward to speaking to everyone again. Thank you and goodbye.